Hello, welcome to another Whisky Me Live tasting. I'm Tristan, I'm your host once again, as always. And we're going to be drinking two fantastic whiskies tonight. I'll just allow a few more to filter in and take their seats before we crack on properly. Hope you've got your dram or drams to hand, and you've got tasting glasses as well. Tonight we are tasting Glasgow Distillery 5-year-old Masala cask, which is our Scotch single malt whiskey. And then hopefully we're tasting Balcones Baby Blue as well. But as it stands, no one from Texas has rocked up. But we've still got 15 minutes for someone to arrive, so we'll see. Obviously, there's a time delay there. Cool. We are going to start with our single malt whiskey, though, as we always do. And to join me on this journey, we are joined by Sebastian from the Glasgow Distilling Company. Hey, Sebastian.
Hello, Tristan. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So we were just saying it's about time you came on and did a live tasting with us, because this is the third time we featured Glasgow Distilling Company.
Yeah, absolutely. Third time, but first time doing an exclusive together. So it's been a fun project, this particular release. Before, I think you guys have taken our unpeated single malt, the 2019 release, and then you also took our first release of our peated. So this feels like a natural progression.
Yeah. I think when we got the first release was the first whiskey you released. We were right in there sort of a couple of months after that initial launch, I think.
Right. So that would have been back in 2018. So back when we got our first whiskey in the market. Yeah, that was an exciting time.
Yeah. As you say, though, it's fantastic. I mean, obviously the relationship has blossomed because you're now providing us with casks of our own, and we're very fortunate, as is proof in the glass, because this whiskey we're tasting this month is one of my favourites we've ever tasted, I think. There's something about it that appeals to me, which we'll get into specifically, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what this whiskey is, how it's been matured, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the Glasgow Distillery, like you say, we are quite a young distillery. Our first whiskey was out on the market in 2018, and that was our unpeated flagship style, which we call the original. Since then, we've been adding to that with different expressions, including our peated whiskies and triple distilled whiskies. So those three, the original, peated, and triple distilled, are kind of our flagship three, and they really represent our three different styles of distillation that we do in the distillery every year. This one that we're trying today is a limited edition version of the peated style. So our core range peated is matured in virgin oak and finished in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks. This particular one here has been matured full term in the Sicilian Marsala casks. So really nice, really interesting kind of take on our signature peated style. What's quite interesting is that and what I've been finding after just trying it again, reminding myself how it tastes this evening, is it really does have that kind of core peated style of Glasgow Distillery, but it's just added something extra with a different style of fruitiness in there. It's a really, really nice, interesting dram. This one that we've done for you guys, so this is actually a combination of two Marsala casks, both distilled and filled on the same day. So that was back in October 2017. And since then, it's been in these two barriques until early January, which is when we bottled it last month.
Nice. So, I mean, do you have a lot of different wine casks hanging around at the distillery that like you're trying stuff out in, besides Marsala?
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the most exciting and interesting parts of the job, is all the kind of innovation and cask experimentation. Because we do the three different styles of spirit, we're filling specialty casks, wine casks, different styles of port casks, sherry casks, beer, tequila, anything we can legally put Scotch whiskey in. We're able to fill it not just with one style of spirit coming from the distillery, but three different styles of spirit. So these Marsala casks are a good example. We have Marsala casks that are filled with peated whiskey, Marsala casks that are filled with unpeated whiskey, and triple distilled unpeated whiskey too. And when we go and try all those different specialty casks, and you're actually trying not just the cask influence, but you're also getting the difference that the initial distillation has had. And really what you're getting there is a real kind of exponential growth in the different flavor profiles of different whiskies that you can get. And, I know that you guys are all about whiskey is all about flavor and creating different styles of flavor. And it's not so much the regions and not so much the brand names. It's all about what's the different flavor profiles you're getting in those different whiskies. Well, by creating 3 different styles of new make spirit, 3 different styles of distillation, your potential for flavor is just growing exponentially. So that's a long way of saying, yes, we've got a few wine casks that we're experimenting with at the moment.
Well, it gives you a lot of opportunity for like in-house blending, doesn't it? You can kind of create products. You've kind of got the full artist's palette of flavors there, right? If you're doing 3 different distillates, everything from kind of triple distilled, unpeated, through to denser, smokier, oily kind of new make spirit, then you've got all the different cask types. You can pretty much kind of make anything within the Scotch whiskey canon with all those kind of ingredients, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's why, and like I say, that's one of the fun parts of the job, is trying all these different flavors, trying all the different experiments and seeing what works and equally what doesn't work, And we're at that stage in our distillery life cycle at the moment where we have a great core range that is doing great guns. And now we're experimenting with the different spirit types and the different casks. So we're kind of finding our way. We're doing a lot of small batch releases, different styles, like I say, with these different styles of spirit. But like you say, also combining different spirit types together on top of that. So instead of having a heavily peated whiskey, having maybe a half peated, half unpeated whiskey to create a lightly peated expression. So that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's really impressed me about what you guys do, and it's the same with the 1771 malts that we've had in the past, and this, is just what can be achieved in a short period of time. We're looking at a 5-year-old whiskey here, which, you go back kind of 10, 20 years, it would have been unheard of to think of a single malt being, sold at that age. You might have got blends sold at that age, and they would have been pretty bad, like low quality, cheap kind of stuff. But I almost feel like with Scotch whiskey, we've been kind of duped into believing that everything needs to be a minimum of 12 years. And it's probably a function of the casks that are actually, or were actually, circulating around the place at the time. They just weren't active enough, or they weren't being managed well enough, or, the blending, whatever, I don't know, whatever it is. But we were kind of all fooled into thinking that everything had to be of that age. And I'm not saying that like a 5-year-old whiskey is necessarily the complete package. There are things that occur with time, a decade on, that's difficult to imitate in young whiskey. But nevertheless, you can get great cask character in that short period of time, I think, and you're showing that time and time again.
Undoubtedly, like I totally agree, and I think part of why we're seeing great whiskey at a younger age is because of the amount of new distilleries that are on the market and that have been set up, maybe, started distilling like ourselves kind of 7-8 years ago, and are now experimenting with spirit that, even though it's relatively young, we're trying things and tasting things in the distillery, and we're thinking, wow, this is great. Let's put it out there and see what people think, showcase what really good whiskey production combined with really good casks can give you. And at the end of the day, as a young distillery with a reputation to build, every release is really important, and you have to really be careful about what you do put out there and make sure it's of the best quality. So, you put a lot of effort and a lot of time in creating really good new make spirits. So your spirit initially is really fruity, really palatable, and then investing in really good quality casks as well. So you get a lot of first fill casks, you get really good cask management and looking after those casks as well. So I think that combination of really good fruity spirit, really good cask management, and investing heavily in those casks is a way to create really good whiskies at a young age, which is what we're seeing with a lot of these younger distilleries like ourselves, our friends at Kilchoman and guys over at like Kingsbarns and Fife, everyone is putting out really good quality whiskies without an age statement or with younger age statements. And I think it really does show, like you say, just the side of the industry that's a bit more innovative, maybe a little bit more people are having to create good whiskies at a young age because they are a young distillery. But I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
No, exactly. It sort of drives innovation, doesn't it? So this whiskey in particular, the reason it kind of floats my boat is it's this balance between smoke and fruit. And we're getting a lot of tasting notes coming through from the comments, by the way, which I'm going to put up in a sec. And a lot of people are sort of saying much the same thing: oily, smoky, fruity. For me, the interesting thing about this, and I haven't had a lot of Marsala cask whiskies, honestly, but there's something about Marsala that seems to me personally to feel quite different to sherry, and that is that the fruitiness coming through feels fresher and more juicy than, say, a sherry cask, where I'd expect to get more like dried fruit, stone fruit kind of things. It's not quite tropical, but it's like every time I drink it, I'm like reminded of sort of bright yellowy kind of grapes, you know. I don't know if you agree or if anyone else agrees with me. Maybe I'm just getting a little bit like weirdly poetic, but it's, for me, that is it. It's this fresh, juicy, like almost sort of peachy, maybe not nearly mangoey, but more like green or yellow grape, and just a nice sort of stream of smoke going through there as well.
100%. I think you've totally hit the nail on the head there with kind of the fresh tropical fruits. That's definitely present. I get a lot of that. And it's kind of more of your like fresher apricots as opposed to maybe those dried apricot notes that you might get in some sherries. It's not really got that raisiny edge. It's more like you say, mango, a little bit of pineapple in there. Absolutely. What I find on the nose, especially, is kind of our signature peated style. It's kind of like smoky barbecue sauce. It's kind of got this rich, kind of sticky, smoky, salty quality. It's just
we put that on the pouch. Barbecue sauce was one of the little icons on there, along with grapes and a bit of banana, which I think is just some of the wood characteristic and maybe some of that tropical. It tastes, you know, if I was going to give it a color, it would be yellow. Like there's a sort of yellowy fruitiness to it. It's not good because you can give certainly flavors color, right? I mean, red is like berries, purple is like stone fruit, green is fresh cut apple and grapes, and yellow is sort of that tropical, maybe peachy kind of melange. Yeah.
I totally agree. It's kind of got that balance between the kind of syrupiness and the freshness that are coming together. Really nicely balanced, work really well together.
Yeah. All right. We've got a super techie question here. What yeast was used to make the whiskey? What do you use? Lots of different yeasts at the distillery or for each distillate, or is it?
Each of our different 3 styles that we make are quite different in their production methods. Our kind of core yeast that we're using is your standards distiller's yeast. So we don't do a huge amount of innovation on the yeast side. We focus more on the casks and the style of distillation itself. So where we are making our changes between the different distillate styles is looking at kind of the cut points and where we're capturing the hearts when we're capturing our spirit, and then where it's going into after that.
All right, nice. Some more tasting notes. We're going to bring Gabe in from Balcones in a second, who knows a thing or two about making incredible tasting whiskey in a reasonably short period of time. Although Balcones have the advantage of time on their hands now, being a little bit older, but and the advantages of the Texas heat as well. But just a few more tasting notes here that I'm going to pop up as we go. Taste is wild, light smoke, not heavy smoke associated with peat. Love the peat. Fruity notes, crisp cake, overripe banana bread. Yeah, I mean it's really lovely whiskey. It's so lovely. I'm just surprised you even sold it to us, and you didn't bottle it yourselves.
Well, I think it's a good tone for sure.
Yeah. Well, we had 60 bottles of this by the time we filled everything, because we sent out 7,000 pouches of it. We had 60 bottles left, and I think at the time of this recording, we have about 10 left in the shop.
No way.
I have a bottle of it there, and as you can see, I'm working my way through it. That's not all from tonight. So yeah, if you want to pick up one, then this is really the last chance, because they'll probably be gone tomorrow, I guess, something like that. Cool. All right. Well, look, you've got some baby blue, haven't you? You got a pouch of that?
I was supposed to, but events conspired against us, I'm afraid. So not tonight.
All right, no worries. Well, I've got some. We're going to bring in Gabe now from Balcones. So here we go. Hey.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, just sorry, scrambling a little behind the scenes. I'm here. Excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. You had to stand in reasonably last minute, I think, because Alex was ill, right?
Yeah. Our brand ambassador was ill. I work in production. I'm like our blender, for lack of a better term. I do all maturation, blending, flavor, innovation, that kind of stuff. So,
cool. Well, you're an excellent ambassador yourself, then, I would say.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. It's been a long time since I've been on a live stream, to be honest. So I'm out of practice.
Oh, you're doing fine. So how long have you worked at Balcones?
I've been here. I'm in my 7th year. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, this is my first gig in alcohol beverage. I came out of oil and gas as like a geologist, geochemist, and yeah, Balcones gave me a shot,
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, there's similar stuff, like a similar crossover stuff between those careers, I guess, with the distillation and oil and pressure and gases and all that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, no, it's definitely been applicable. I actually I studied it at University of Kentucky for my master's degree. So when I was there, I was a poor graduate student and taking a lot of free distillery tours, drinking a lot of bourbon. So I kind of got into whiskey by way of that, being on a poor, low income assistantship. And yeah, and then I was getting out of oil and gas, and I was like, oh, that was pretty fun. So I should look into whiskey, because that was a good time.
Yeah, that does seem like a better career choice.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Balcones may be well known to some of our members because it has a pretty good foothold over here in the UK as far as sort of non-Kentucky whiskeys go, non-Kentucky American whiskeys go, because it's been coming into the UK now for at least 10 years, I would say. I mean, it really wasn't long after the distillery started. I don't think that there was a steady import of it.
Yeah, even when we couldn't keep up with our own, even Texas demand, I know we were shipping small pallets out to the UK to kind of stay involved in the conversation. But yeah, and as we've kind of built our organization a bit, I think we've kept up sending stuff out there. I think predominantly y'all have like our core offering rarely get special releases or single barrels. But you may have some single barrels floating around in the UK and the EU. But yeah, I know I don't think y'all have Lineage, our newest core single malt. We don't distribute that overseas.
No. Yeah, you're right. It's been the same kind of core selection of products since the start. Well, I don't know if there's been a lot of new stuff added, but Baby Blue's certainly had a presence here since the start. And that was the first whiskey you guys ever released, I believe.
Yeah, the first whiskey made in Texas since Prohibition.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've been around. This is our 15th year. I would love to say we have some 15-year-old whiskeys, but in a standard size cask, after about 7 or 8 years, everything's fully evaporated, and so we're working on older whiskeys, older age statements, but most of our stuff maxes out around 8 to 10 years old. We could get away with 10 years in a used cask, but in a less used cask or in a virgin cask, we usually clip out around 6-7 years. So yeah, I'm not fully aware of the format.
And that's not. Go on. Sorry.
No, I was saying I'm happy to dive into more details on Baby Blue as it comes. I know people are already sipping.
Yeah, there will be. Well, yeah, we'll talk about Baby Blue in a second. Just maybe a little bit more information about the distillery would be good. Sure. So you mentioned it's been around about 15 years. I know you had a big kind of move and upgrade around about 10 years ago, maybe, when you shifted to the current site. Is that right?
Yeah. So it was in 2016. So we were we were founded in a tiny little machine shop about 5 blocks down from us. Very small space, about 2,000 square feet, a little bit bigger than a studio apartment, and then we were in that space for a long time in producing spirit. But we bought the building that we're in. It was abandoned, sitting empty for decades, and we bought it pretty cheap. And we were just storing raw goods, cardboard boxes and grain and bottles and stuff like that, with the intention that we would raise money and move into it. And then we bought it I think in 2011 was when we actually bought the bigger building. we started building it out in 2014 and then moved in all of our production into it in 2016. So we've been here, we've been here 7-ish years in this new building.
Yeah. Because I visited it around about 6 years ago, and it's an amazing distillery. It's like an old sort of lockup, like storage building, right, where people would kind of store whatever stuff they wanted to store. But the way you guys have laid it out is just beautiful, and the one of the things that stuck with me was the stills you've got there, which are Scottish from Forsyths. But one of them's got that enormous coil on top of it. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. So yeah, the building itself is it's actually 100 years old this year. It's a centennial. I know for y'all on the other side of the pond, it's like big whoop, but for us, it's like in Texas, it's like the oldest building. It's amazing. So yeah, 100-year-old building made of brick and concrete, and when we moved into it. So we had this tiny facility, and a lot of our condensers and our stills at that point were handmade. A lot of our mash tun, our fermenters, a ton of it was just slapped together. This was a very shoestring budget, as we like to say. So at the old facility, they built the line arm. They built the condenser, but they mounted it to a wall because we weren't very fancy, and we couldn't afford a ton of pumps to move things around. And so we needed to get the vapor to the highest point of the building so it could gravity feed down to where it needed to go. So they built this really long line arm that trailed along the slope of the roof and then would meet the condenser, condense high up on the wall, and then go down a network of pipes into whatever tank it needed to go into. And because of that, when we moved into this building, Forsyth was obviously increasing our scale by almost 20-fold. And they needed to create this really long line arm because they wanted to mimic our still geometry. But it would have had to be like a 50-meter line arm to mimic the same geometry. And they said, well, that's obviously not going to work. So they coiled it instead. So they made this really crazy helical line arm. And it is silly looking, but it's also a huge part of our character of our distillate. Obviously, we get a lot of copper contact, so we strip out a lot of sulfur. We can slow down and actually really separate compounds, so we can get a very bright spirit if we want to, depending on how hard we're running the stills. And yeah, we don't, in Texas, the climate's so intense, and we're a young distillery, so we've been putting out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old whiskeys. We don't have the time to load up with a ton of fusels and heavy alcohols and wait it out for decades for those things to polymerize and soften and to become elegant. So the high copper contact and the really tall condensers and tall stills help us to really clean up and brighten the spirit for a shorter maturation period.
Yeah. And you are making lots of different types of whiskey as well, aren't you? I mean, we will get onto Baby Blue in a second, and corn whiskey particularly, but just give us an overview of what you are making at Balcones, or what you aren't making. Maybe would be better.
I mean, we would, yeah. This is why they don't let me out much. We would like to be only making single malt, but we have a big facility, and we started with corn whiskey. Our desire is that American single malt takes off, and it can basically replace every day of production. As it is, American drinkers are very keen for bourbon and rye. So yeah, our portfolio actually spans, we have like a lot of like gateway drugs for American drinkers. They can get in with a bourbon or a rye and then go, oh, they also have a single malt for $10 more. I'll try that. So that's kind of how the portfolio has ended up being designed. We launched with a corn whiskey. We always wanted to make American single malt. That was why we got into it. But we got off the bat with this young corn whiskey, Baby Blue. And then we made Texas One single malt. A couple years later, we made rye, a Texas rye with a lot of bold specialty malted rye to give it a lot of like roasty, chocolatey flavor. Eventually, we released a pot still bourbon that's made with our roasted blue corn as a base, as well as some Texas wheat and some Texas rye and some Texas malted barley. And yeah, so we actually have quite a lot. We now have 2 malts in our core range: our Baby Blue corn whiskey, our rye, our bourbon, and then we have kind of in our core range. It's a corn whiskey called Brimstone. It's made with roasted blue corn and it's smoked with Texas scrub oak. It's kind of like the really big, angry, anarchist brother of Baby Blue. Big, bold, obnoxious, dark, sultry, aggressive flavors, whereas Baby Blue is this very calm masa, polenta, tortilla palette.
Yeah, we do get brimstone over here, or at least we used to. I'm pretty sure it still comes over here. So if anyone wants to try that, you can get hold of it. Are you doing peated and unpeated in your malt?
Yeah, so the peat, there's very separate streams, but yeah, we do. As far as we know, we're the only ones laying down peated Golden Promise. So Texas One Single Malt, our flagship malt, is made with Simpson's Golden Promise. For a time, we were making with Fawcett's Golden Promise, which is floor malted. Then we switched to Simpson's because of our scale. So it's made with Simpson's Golden Promise, and yeah, we get a custom whole floor of Simpson's peated Golden Promise every year to our ppm specification. It's peated with the Highland peat, and we've done that every year the past, I don't know, like 5 years. We may be down ramping that a little bit to explore other smoke flavors closer to us and kind of more in tune with Texas. But yeah, we've really enjoyed the peat that we've laid down. It's beautiful stuff. We'll have a big release of that hopefully in like calendar year 2024.
Cool.
Yeah.
So on to Baby Blue. So this is the first corn whiskey we've done in Whisky Me, and corn whiskey is maybe the least familiar category of whiskey to UK whiskey drinkers, I would say. We really don't get a lot of corn whiskey over here, and it's certainly not a lot consumed. But of course, everyone's quite familiar with bourbon, and the two are not a million miles from one another. So maybe could you just give us a bit of a primer on what defines corn whiskey and how it's different to bourbon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, corn has to be 80% corn or more. So it's a little different with bourbon. It's obviously quite a bit lower. It's got to be 51%. With corn, it has to be above 80. And then bourbon, as we all know, has to go into virgin oak containers. Where corn whiskey has to go into used oak or new uncharred containers. So the profile ends up being a lot more grain forward because the oak extractives don't really come in and overprint and kind of smother the grain. So yeah, when we got into it as a small craft distillery, you know, if we wanted to make a little bit more money right off the bat, it would maybe have been smarter to make bourbon. But everyone was making bourbon, and there's an established whiskey tradition in the United States of bourbon, and you know, we weren't looking to kick anyone off of their podium, you know, so we thought we'd do something a little bit different. And so corn whiskey is what it was. There's not a lot of white oak that's grown in Texas, you know, so the idea of, you know, where you're making the first Texas whiskey and your first step is to import an ingredient from 2,500 miles away or 1,500 miles away is like, well, that doesn't seem super great and super indicative of the future of Texas whiskey. And so, yeah, we started with used barrels and this roasted blue corn. It was actually a blue corn that had been around for a very long time from the Hopi Indian tribe in New Mexico, which is a state in the United States. And they were growing it. They had a storied history and a relationship with this corn variety. And at the time, our scale was small enough we could get the corn directly from them. And this is like hand pollinated, you know, very, very down home, very craft. Since then, we've switched to like a hybridized variety that's open pollinated that we can grow fully in Texas. So the last 5-6 years, we've grown this exclusively in Texas. But it's I actually have 2 bottles here. So yeah, most corn in the U.S. is grown with this, the yellow dent corn, right? And that goes into bourbons and a lot of you know, the majority of the whiskey made in the United States. The roasted blue corn looks more like this. It's like a dark, dusky, almost violet purple. The camera's not really catching it. Almost looks black, but yeah, it's like this very dark blue. And then the roasting process just kind of butters it up a little bit. You know, it comes off the field full of protein and very kind of like flinty. Can be a little sulfury, a little vegetal, and the roasting process just kind of scrubs it up and brightens it and cleans it a little bit. the flavor wise. And then, yeah, you end up getting this very oily distillate. All of our, another thing too that's coming across in this whiskey, which I don't see people noting it yet, but all of our whiskeys are rather fruity. We really emphasize fruit because we have this short maturation cycle. So if we start with something pretty grainy with a really short fermentation, we don't really have the time to wait for it to get interesting. So all of our fermentations are 7 days. It used to be a lot longer, but now as we've scaled up, we've kind of frozen it at 7 days of fermentation. So all of our alcohol is consumed, and all of our sugars are consumed, and our alcohol is produced after about 48 hours. And then we have 5.5 days of just acidification. So the lactobacillus that's living on the surface of our facilities and our equipment kind of comes alive and, feasts on the nitrogen of the dead bodies of the yeast cells, and creates these really incredible fruity flavors. And so even in this young corn whiskey, which is very grainy, it is very masa, polenta, corn tortilla forward and oily, but there's also these very delicate, soft kind of flutters of orchard fruit and a little tropical fruit and stone fruit if you look hard enough. So that's by design. And that's, we don't want to make something that just tastes like oil and tortilla, but to make something with a little more interesting and a little bit more sex appeal, so.
Yeah. And do you think it's actually more achievable with the corn whiskey as opposed to a bourbon, where you're bound by that use of new oak, which is obviously going to impart quite a kick of, all those vanillins and everything?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think the running American joke is like, I love bourbon. I have a lot of bourbon at home, but kind of the running joke is like, oh, you don't like corn, or you don't like whiskey, you like oak. Like,
yeah,
you like degraded, you like caramelized wood sugar, and you like degraded lignin and vanillin and polyphenols. You're not even really tasting the grain. Most of the tasting notes that bourbon producers would be spitting out, maybe like, I don't know, 4 out of 5 are all oak flavors, and then 1 out of 5 is like, oh, cherry. Okay, now you're talking about maybe an ester or some quality of the grain or something like that. But yeah.
Well, it's an interesting thing, isn't it, when a spirit category or subcategory gets protected through its production, and that there's got to be a balance there between how strictly it's protected, because you protect it too much and everything starts to taste the same, because they're all bound by the same production process. You don't protect it enough, then the category becomes a little bit woolly and fuzzy as to what it actually means, and there's too much diversity in it. And this is why these things are shifting now. We're seeing it with Scotch. It's being opened up to the use of more weirder casks, less traditional casks at the moment, because it needs to compete with, it needs to compete with the likes of Balcones, to be honest with you. Yeah. And I think with bourbon, possibly it's a little bit too restricted in terms of the way it can be produced. And that's why everything tastes sort of largely the same, and it's quite delicious, but it's all quite similar,
Yeah, it's a little more. It feels a little more like established, like cognac or something, where these rules exist because this flavor profile is trying to be created through these boundaries and these railings, these guardrails.
Yeah.
But I think that's very beautiful, because that I love being able to pick up a bourbon and go, yeah, like I kind of know what I'm getting, and that's why I'm picking this bottle, or that's why I've decided to drink this. And then, I mean, even in the world of Scotch and single malts from the UK, I feel like there tends to be a bit more of a diversity because of the different casks that you can use and different aging regimes, and there's a lot. I think there's different choices that are being made on the grain selection and the still design and that kind of stuff. Whereas in Kentucky, it's columns and it's yellow corn and it's white oak char number 3 and that's it. But it is beautiful. It's lovely stuff.
Yeah. So how's corn whiskey doing in the US? How's it doing in Texas, and how's it doing in the US? Is it a growing kind of category?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Baby Blue, despite our best efforts, Baby Blue is done really well. I think Heaven Hill has released some really interesting older corn whiskeys. I think there's been brands that kind of like find these corn whiskeys that have these higher age statements and end up being rather compelling just by nature of sitting in used oak for a really long time. So I mean, I wouldn't say that it's the next hot thing and it's taking off at a mile a minute, but there definitely are corn whiskeys, especially as people have experimented with different types of corn. Things have gotten a little bit more interesting. Obviously, I feel like you can only go so far with a yellow corn, but there's folks in Texas who are doing red corn and orange corn and Oaxacan green corn. We ourselves are experimenting with some kind of heirloom, heritage, I guess, Mexican corn varieties. And yeah, it's an amazing world to discover. And the neat thing too is that most of the discovery has happened in cuisine. It's people taking these corns and they're making really amazing dishes out of it. And they're making tortillas and masas and polentas and really amazing restaurants in Mexico City and along the border and in major cities in the United States. And now it's people going, oh, wow, there's like a pink corn that tastes like watermelon. Like, cool. Like we should put that in a barrel, or this blue corn that just tastes very, very, very earthy and oily and rich and subtle. In its own way, and very not the candy corn, butterscotch, toffee necessarily of yellow corn. So I think it's definitely an interesting time for it. I wouldn't say that it's growing like leaps and bounds and it's the next bourbon. But honestly, despite our best efforts, like when we released our rye and when we released our bourbon, we'd had Baby Blue in our portfolio the whole time. We were convinced each one of those was going to kill Baby Blue. Oh well, certainly when we released this Wood Bomb, that's the same price or cheaper than our corn whiskey, everyone's going to migrate away. And Baby Blue just like continues to grow. You can't stop it. Every year we're like, we need to do more of this, but it's great. I mean, I think it just speaks to people wanting something a little bit more delicate and a little subtler. And it's hard to make a highball with a bourbon, but you can make it with something a little bit more elegant and backed off of oak. And I think it's kind of the application that we see for things like Baby Blue and our malts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess do you think it sits sort of more towards like a blended Scotch kind of characteristic as opposed to bourbon where you got more of that vanilla and everything coming through? Is that, and therefore more appropriate for a highball?
I honestly wouldn't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't spend a lot of time behind the bar, but yeah, I think there is something about it that just feels that feels more approachable and feels a little less aggressive. It happens to be our bourbon and Baby Blue are both at 46% ABV because everything's pot distilled. We don't go lower than 46%. We don't chill filter or anything. So for us, it's actually the easiest drinking thing pretty much that I'd say that we offer. And so, I think because of that, people just gravitate towards that ease and that approachability, which I think the more time you spend in whiskey and the more wine finishing and high ABV stuff that you do, the more you find yourself going back to like the 43% scotches or the 40% ABV bourbons and going like, oh man, I'd really like my mouth not to be numb in an hour, but yeah, we definitely find ourselves in the Texas climate going on this journey of having made really intense whiskeys and now finding ourselves going like, okay, well now we have to drink these in a summer that's 9 months long. So let's actually kind of encourage the consumption of spirits that are very approachable and easily mixable and great in sparkling water, and that we want to drink all year round.
What sounds really nice, Gabe, is that you've kind of got something for every type of consumer. And like you say, different times of the year. Like within your portfolio, you've got those much more kind of robust wood influenced expressions, but you've got this really nice kind of light, easier drinking style as well. So you must have, do you find that your customers do kind of tend to gravitate towards different expressions depending on like different occasions or time of the year?
Yeah, no, I think so. I honestly do. I think we end up siloing certain customers. I mean, I think y'all may know this because y'all, I was poking around the Glasgow Distillery. It looks really great. I wish I had a sample of the juice, but yeah, y'all have a gin. And so y'all may have like gin drinkers who just like, they just don't go in for special release malts, but they're happy to have the gin, you know. And so I think we end up finding that sometimes the idea is that, you know, they're sampling across the whole brand and they're exploring the whole portfolio. And there's the option. But yeah, I mean, I definitely find myself doing that. I find myself in winter going like, oh, I'll do a pour of like a cask strength single barrel. And then in the summer, just like pouring Baby Blue on sparkling water, you know, because it's 100, you know, it's like 40 degrees Celsius outside, you know, so.
That's the joy of the spirit type, I guess. You know, it's so flexible, so versatile. There's so much to play with and such, so many different levels of flavor.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys are founded in 2014. Sorry, I don't mean to derail, but yeah, you've been around for a bit.
Yeah. So we started distilling in 2015 is when we laid down our first casks. We were kind of founded 2014, and it's kind of similar to yourselves. You know, we're very much like an urban contemporary style of distillery where, you know, it's not really what you typically think of when you think of, you know, Scotch whiskey. There's no hills and heather. We're based on the outskirts of our city, and we're all kind of about making like good, modern, authentic, quite transparent like spirits, be that across like whiskey, gin, vodka, and rum. So I find the description that you had.
You were first distiller in Glasgow for 100 years, right? And Balcones first distiller in Texas for 100 years.
Oh, nice.
We were so we were actually the second whiskey distillery. So yeah, we released the first whiskey in Texas, but we didn't have the first DSP as a whiskey producer.
Okay.
But,
nice.
Yeah.
It does sound awesome. The distillery is kind of sounds like a Willy Wonka's kind of factory of making different spirits. That's cool.
Yeah. No, I think people always show up and they either think that, what's his name? Mark Gillespie, I think, put it best. He said, I can't decide if you're a small, big distillery or a big, small distillery. But yeah, it's usually, the scale is usually kind of intense for people. But yeah, we own the whole block, and we got with pretty big stills, big old still house. We got about, I'd say about 40 employees on site. So yeah, we're definitely clipping.
Oh, well, that's good scale. I mean, I do have a sample of your whiskey somewhere, so I'm really looking forward to trying it, hopefully tomorrow.
Cool. No worries. Yeah.
I would also say that Balcones have some of the best merchandise in the spirits business as well. I have 2 sweatshirts which I still regularly wear. They need to be thrown in the bin, to be honest with you. They're pretty tiny, but they're very cool merch indeed. Don't know if there's an online store that can deliver to the UK, but I need to order some more. Cool. Well, look, guys, that's been a lot of fun, and you've had just millions of comments about how delicious the whiskies are and how interesting they were this month, and I think that's true. We've had a very interesting Scotch whiskey there, and well, like I say, our first corn whiskey, and something that's just very different and really, really tasty. So yeah, thanks for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. It's been great. Really enjoyed it.
All right. And thanks everyone for